Good day everyone, so we'll be looking at how we can beat up the triple Kenki trio with a Nilou Bloom team and some of the variations. So let's just sort of get right into it. The first variation is the fastest one. I saw this sort of idea from Jamie, so I decided to copy it, and well, the results will speak for themselves. We'll analyze this in a bit more detail later on in the video, but it certainly is quite a little fun strategy to play with. And yeah, I think if we were just like slightly more lucky with Nehida critting on some of the Dendro cores, we could have probably even reduced the time to 16.5 or 16 seconds, but it was certainly quite fun. The next one I want to show you quickly is an alternative variation. This is the one I like running, and this is where we just abuse Nilou's interruption resistance. You'll see it right here in the middle, so we just start dancing immediately and then we get our abilities on the field. And yeah, that is going to be then a quick little 17 seconds plus something as well. So these are the two sort of major ways you can play it, and I'll have a bit of an analysis as to what like their strengths and weaknesses are. But of course, let's just look at some other things as well. You might be wondering what happens if we put in a C6R5 Yelan instead of Kokomi. The results are actually not as good, even though you've got like a bit more mobility and you can get to the enemies a bit faster here. My problem still with Yelan and I'll show you in a second, like Yao Yao, is the fact that you don't have that persistent off-field like application. So yeah, you can see we're doing all the wonderful things and it looks fast, but as you sort of noted here from the time, it's not that good. And obviously, what about Yao Yao? Well, I'll just let the clip speak for itself because this was kind of funny. Yeah. So we're trying to do it more or less in the exact same way that we did it earlier, and now we're sort of just going to put like a little Yao Yao, a little bunny or rabbit or whatever on, and for all the good healing that Yao Yao is supposed to provide, we just pretty much died with Yelan, so not that great whatsoever. Right, so with all the introductory stuff out of the way, let's do a bit of a breakdown on each of the two runs. So the first thing that I want to mention is that the way in which I sort of record the timings for these is to sort of look at the moment that the sort of start challenge button is pressed. So the moment you press the F key here, and you can see here it lights up in yellow, that's when I sort of record the start time. And also when the enemy health bars disappear, it'll be roughly at about this point. You can see here, the moment this happens, they go up, or the little opponent's defeat or whatever challenge thing goes away, and that's typically when the run ends. I think that's the most fairest and accurate way to sort of do it, and obviously here in the frame counting software, we can get an exact frame by frame count. In this case, the difference is about 17.083 seconds, pretty much 17 seconds. So that's just for you guys to note how I actually sort of do the frame counting. Alright, so let's actually start to break down the little run and see what we can get out of it. So this is the Jamie sort of variation. So first off, we want to sort of start to dash. This is because we want to sort of trick the enemy AI not to have the little galloping frost dash towards us, but instead to sort of stay with the rest of the mob. And immediately we spin around with Nehida, we tag all three of them. The enemy is now going to hit us with a sword attack right now. And what we then do is we just iframe here with Kole's elemental burst. So each one of those slashes we kind of avoid, we can dash forward, and all of them are grouped up very, very nicely. And now obviously Nilou can go and sort of hit them. One of the things that you do need to note, and I found this very often, is that your second or third like attack, so if Nilou gets a sort of cryo infusion, that means you, no, sorry, not cryo infusion, you're affected by cryo, which means that your Nilou's attack speed is sort of slower. This is one of the things that the little Kenki trio is like very, very good at. They slow down your like animation and casting times, not the animation for your elemental burst, but for all your other abilities, normal attacks, elemental skills, and that can be something that leads to a bit of a loss in time, but nonetheless. So here is Nilou's ring, and now we can obviously go to Kokomi, ensuring that we've got all our Hydra on the ground. We still have enough Dendro auras on the enemy due to Kole here, and obviously with the combination of Nehida. And here we go, a little Temple of Wisdom. This is going to give our active character more of an EM buff. So as you can see, what I'm doing now with Nehida is I'm just sort of using her C6 free shots just to evenly get a bit more Dendro going on the field, and obviously to reduce the health bars. And now we're just going to sort of iframe all of the attacks using now Kokomi's elemental burst. This applies 2 units of Hydro onto all of the enemies, which is very, very strong. And then we're obviously going to go into Nilou, and then this is sort of like game set match. So what's very important about all of this is, is for you to sort of realize how we layer our abilities, in particular our elemental burst, to iframe all of the enemy's attacks, because these enemies can be very it can be very annoying when they interrupt your characters, when your characters are frozen. I think your biggest risk in running a team like this is for your Kokomi to get like frozen. The same can happen, of course, with like Xingshu and especially with Barbara as well. So do keep that in mind. But one of the ways in which to mitigate this is to have enough sort of base like Dendro and Hydro going, and then sort of just rotate or cycle through your elemental bursts, get all those iframes, and just let the little Dendro or Bountiful Cores do the work. That's kind of the easiest way to sort of look at it. Right, so that is that is Jamie's variation. So let's quickly look at the variation that I typically like to play. And I'll sort of show you why I like playing this variation. So right off the bat, we can start off early with Nilou. Now this has a very big downside because we're not hitting the enemies with our weapons, so we're potentially losing out on a lot of EM, though I do feel like this is a bit faster for one simple reason. You can now have Kokomi and Nilou up without any risk to being frozen or your attacks being slowed by any cryo. And then now you can of course then sort of use Nahida, give everyone like an EM share, there's Kale, and now you've got a very nice overlap between your Dendro and Hydro, so your Dendro core production is maximized even though your Dendro core damage is not as great because you didn't hit the enemies with the key. One thing that you'll do note here is that the grouping is much more even, and so all of the enemies themselves lose like health continuously, and they've got a continuous like Dendro aura on them, so that's like pretty cool. And there we go, that is like a sort of game set match. So barring a bit of RNG and stuff like that, I do feel like Jamie's way of doing it is the more technically correct way. So you layer all your buffs, and I think at a C0 level that's going to be very important. Otherwise you're just not going to have strong enough like Dendro cores. But certainly as you get more and more constellation and weapon refinements and all these things, there's more room to sort of like play around and such. But yeah, that's just sort of what I found. But yeah, it's been really cool. I kind of like doing these sorts of things, not because of the timing itself, but because of all the ways in which you need to think about how you're going to play your abilities, how you're going to position, how you're going to ensure maximum Dendro core production. And at the end of the day, whatever the time is, that's just a sort of nice little add-on. Whether you do it in 20 seconds, 17, 15, 30, it really doesn't matter, as long as you understand how you're playing and how you can maximize the value for your team. I think that is the big sort of like key takeaway. And that is also why I'm not that convinced on Yao Yao, because what these team members here are doing is all of them are doing things off field, whereas with Yao Yao, to get your Dendro core production to its max, you need to be on field, and you then need to attack with her to trigger your Xingshu or Yelan sort of Hydro attacks, and those attacks don't even trigger in an AoE. So you then need to hug the enemies with like Xingshu's rain swords to get that extra bit of like Hydro, squeezing it in every 2.5 seconds. So that's just why I'm not as convinced on the Yao Yao teams like I sort of showed. Alright guys, thanks for watching, cheers.